Can you guys see me now? I'm not sure if this is a... it's not typing in the chat for some reason. Sorry, chat closed. Chat closed. Okay. Oh, that's not the right one. Let me try changing this. Edit it. All right. Now I gotta find out how to get to the chat. I'm a noob. I don't know. For some reason, no, this is not right. I don't know. Can you guys hear me? I'm like the guy that walks around Verizon. Can you hear me now? Can you see me now? It's like there's a huge delay here. I'll see you fine. Okay. You'll lag behind chat if that's what you're wondering. I'm looking at my screen and it's like whatever, like if I would ban like this, it takes a good minute for it to come through. But as long as I can see the chat, I guess that doesn't really matter. As long as you guys can hear me fine, I'll get started. This is a lot more difficult than my usual live stream experience, which is on Monday night. I just wait for Backwards Law to send me the link, and I click it, and then bang, I'm in. All I got to do is mute my thing, and it works. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on. But as long as you can see me and hear me, Southern Ohio, yeah, 3 to 5 second delay. It's much longer than that. It's almost a full minute, but I'm just going to try not to focus on what's on the screen. I'll just watch the chat. That might actually help me. What I'm going to do is maximize this out so I can't see myself. So, thanks everybody for coming. This is really my first attempt at a live stream. I'm going to try to just watch the chat here and see, but I see we got Backwoods Law and Purple T-Bear, Southern Ohio Prepping, Bobby Mojo, Just in Time Prepping. Saw Prepper X was in here before. And let's see, go down and see if I missed anybody. Gibson Girl. And looks like Dad on YouTube. Looks like that's probably it. And if I missed anybody, I'm sorry. But so I wanted to come on and talk a little bit about gardening. And this is really my first attempt to sure, Backwards Law. If I could figure out how to send the link. Let me see. I'd love to have you join me. But you know what? I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to. I think this can't be this easy. No, of course not. Let me bear with me just a moment. I'm going to try to do this. I'm going to try to do it. Let's see. I'm off topic here for a second. I want to go on my email, and I'm going to try to send you the link. Backwards Law. I apologize. I really wanted to be more organized, but I suppose it's just not in the cards for me, at least not tonight. If I can get this done, it'll be a miracle. All right, no subject. All right, sending it on secure with no subject. Well, let's get back to here. All right, so tonight, I want to talk a little bit about what I got going on for gardening. So a lot of you probably might have seen the video that I made about the seed starters, and they actually germinated and popped up a lot sooner than I thought they were going to. So that's okay. I wasn't expecting them for a week or so, and then they kind of just popped up like within a couple days. Actually, I think most of them said 8 to 10 day germination process and period. And what happened was within 3 days, I had most of them. There's still some that didn't pop, and I don't expect to get 100%. So seeds, yes, the seeds are doing well. Purple, I was very happy with them. I get my seeds mostly. Hey, hi Daniel. How are you, Daniel? God is my judge. Good to see you, brother. I get my seeds from my gardener, and I've had good luck with him in the past. And most of his seeds are 99 cents for the package, so they're affordable, and they seem to be good quality from the times that I've used them and stuff. So my plan was to, as soon as my foot gets better, which should be soon, to get out there and start doing stuff. I want to build some cold frames because even though it's pretty early still, I figured another month I could put them out if I had some kind of cold frame protection. So, that's kind of my plan. And I've got some materials to build it, and I've got some ideas about how I want to do that. And what I'm hoping to do is get that done very first thing when I get mobile, get them out here, because I want to try to. I mentioned this in one of the videos. I want to try to expand the season on my greens. I eat a salad pretty much every day with lunch, and I want to try to grow, as much as I can of my own greens. So I got a whole bunch of different stuff there, and if I can get them under the cold frames, then even in March and April, I should be able to have some pretty good success with them. It's never too early if you have cold frames. That's true. I don't actually have the cold frames yet. I've got most of the material. I got to build them. I had a little setback because of my foot, my ankle. So I just getting anxious and I was going crazy in here. So I decided to start them. May have been a little early, but worst come to worst, I'll just have to transplant them into something bigger in here to keep them coming along. And that's okay. I mean, that'll be okay. So there's a lot of things out there with infrastructure in my garden that need to be attended to. And the cold frames are just, one aspect of it. And then I did break down and bought some compost. I got it out there ready to go because I'm attempting to make my own compost, and I'm making it from leaf mold and kitchen scraps and stuff like that. And it's coming along, but it's going to take some time. And setting up the beds for the first time, the amount I'm going to need was pretty significant. And so I decided to break down to try to buy some. And so I've got that sitting out there ready to go. When I build the beds, I'm going to build them raised because of my back issues too. I don't want to do as little bending over as possible. And so I'm going to make a pretty tall bed, but I'm going to fill them with some downed wood, trees and stuff like that. So not that that's, full hugelkultur, but hey, Bruce. Good to see you, brother.
Hello, I got your back, man. Go ahead, you chat, and if there's a question, I'll let you know.
All right, I appreciate it. It's good to have you. Thanks for helping me out. So I'm gonna fill up most of those beds, probably 2/3, 3/4 of the way, with wood that will rot down and eventually feed the soil, and that'll promote the worms and all, the microbial life and all that. And then for most of what I'm growing, I don't think I need more than a foot of dirt. Well, I know for the greens, or maybe for some of the squashes and stuff, I might need a little more. And so different beds will be different heights, different levels of depth on them. And so as I build that out, I'm just going to start with one at a time and just going to keep moving it out. Last year, I got down here, it was the middle of April, and so I did everything in containers, mostly everything. I did some watermelons and some cantaloupes on the ground, and almost everything else was in containers. And so I had some limited success. My squash got pretty wiped out, and I don't think it was the container issue because they were 10 or 15 gallon containers. I believe I had enough space for the root mass, but got attacked by some kind of bug or parasite. I was watering it and I lifted up one of the leaves and the little piece of the stalk snapped, and there were like hundreds of these little tiny bugs in there. So I'm pretty sure that was the issue with them, but I got almost no squash. And then, my neighbor lives right across the street. He's 80 and he's been here forever, and he had tons of squash. So I still got squash because he gave me a bunch, but I wasn't able to grow any. My tomatoes did really good. I grew some basil, that did really good, and my peppers did extremely good. And those were everything pretty much, all that stuff was in containers. And so I think, especially because I've got a time frame issue building out the beds and the infrastructure, I think what I'm going to do is and I may always choose to do my peppers in containers. They just did so good that I believe having the soil raised up in a container, a black container, soaks up the sun. And I think that, especially with the peppers, I don't think it could ever be too hot or the soil could be too warm, as long as, of course, you keep it watered. But I couldn't imagine having better success with the peppers and even the tomatoes. So I did get some blight on some of the tomatoes, but I think what I did was I aggressively planted it like they were planted too close. And so as they grew and bushed out, I tried to trim the suckers, but they grew together. So I don't think they had the proper airflow in between them. And I think that was my issue. And I still got a great yield from with my tomatoes. But so going forward, at least for this year, the tomatoes and peppers are still going to be in the containers. But I think that, like I said, I may always do the peppers in the containers. And I want to expand and do some more containers. And then in the fall, I want to do some garlics. Is there a question, Bruce?
Purple was just asking you what you should ask your neighbor what his secret was, how he got his squash to grow so well.
Yeah, that's a good that's a good point. I think because we talked quite a bit about it, and he's pretty forthcoming with the information. I'm not sure if this is it or not, but I know that he uses chemical pesticides, and so I want to try to avoid that. And he uses chemical fertilizer as well. Now, down here, everything is clay. So I believe clay has a decent mineral content in it, but maybe not like the full spectrum of what you need. And I believe that the insecticide, the chemical that he uses, he sprays something on it, might be what killed the bugs. But I could try to pin him down on that if he even knows. He probably does. He looks at me like I got three heads because I'm doing raised beds, and it's just completely different. Like the containers, he'd never seen that before, and he had a great success in his garden. So apparently he does know something that. But if it's because of the chemicals that he uses, I really don't want to go down that road. And I think that I can have maybe not as much success, but I believe I can have success without it. So, but that's a good point.
If you got the bug problem, I know Purple uses the 7 dust, and it's relatively easy to clean off of the vegetables because it's on the outside. It won't really get into the soil and stuff unless you turn it into the soil or something.
Okay, what's it called?
7 dust.
7 dust. I'll have to look into that because I wouldn't mind using something if I thought it would help. Something a little milder, yeah, I would try to nail him down and see what he uses too. I think he does some pretty heavy stuff. So I think he uses quite a bit, quite a few different things. And if I'm not mistaken, he tills things into the soil too. But I guess it would bear some more investigation. So I think going forward, I want to do I had these little round watermelons. They were small and they didn't get like oval and oblong. They were more roundish. The biggest one might have been just slightly smaller than a basketball, but they were so sweet and delicious. I want to do some more of those. I want to grow some more of those. And I had pretty good luck with the cantaloupe. I want to do some more of those too. I had a lot of cucumbers. So the cantaloupe, the watermelon, and the cucumbers are 3 things that I planted directly into the ground. And all of them did fairly well. The cantaloupe and the watermelon tasted great. The cucumbers, I got quite a bit of them, but almost all of them were extremely bitter. And to the point where you couldn't even really eat them. So not sure what was going on there. It might be a mineral, deficiency or whatever. So I think I got some really rich, loamy compost. And I'm thinking that maybe that'll solve that. And then, as I said, I'm trying to make my own compost. So going forward, I hope to replenish every year without buying more, just from what I can make here. I just had to buy some this year because I couldn't make enough to fill the beds and get on top of it. And like I said, even though I'm filling those beds with wood, that will rot down and feed the soil, I'm still going to need quite a bit. I want to do quite a few beds, so I'm going to need, and I got to refill the buckets and the containers, so I'm going to need quite a bit of compost. But that's kind of my plan for there. And so because of that, I'll kind of be in two different areas too, which, that's the other side of it. I've got some ideas for, and I already have a rain catchment system, but I have plans to expand it, which was going to happen over the winter, but because of my ankle, didn't. So my goal is to water as much as possible, hopefully 100% with rainwater. And I came pretty close this year to it. We had a very rainy year, and my garden is going to be a lot bigger this year. So the garden was smaller last year, but I only had the 2 totes, and I'm planning to go to 4. So I'm hoping that I can come pretty close to doing it just with rainwater. But where my existing garden is, where the containers are, it's kind of, the property is not real hilly, but it's sloped slightly, decently. And that garden's by the house, which is kind of at the top. So it's sunny all in the back and it slopes down. I'm doing the beds kind of at the bottom, so that, oh, Prepper X, thank you, sir. That's too generous. I really appreciate it, brother. Really appreciate it. That'll be well used. I'll go to buying some materials for my garden. But what I want to do is I want to, where the rain catchment is on the house, it dips down into like the walk-in for the basement. So the barrels are stay up here. I want to collect the water. I'm looking for an old trailer, and I'm going to mount one of the totes to that, and I can pull it in and drain, gravity feed into it from the rain catchment, and then pull that with the tractor up by where the old garden is, which is kind of at the high spot, and then gravity feed with a hose down to where the beds are. So, because that was the other thing last year, I filled it up with a 50-gallon, it was a 40 or 50-gallon barrel, and I would fill it up every night, and I would strap it into the loader of the tractor, drive it up, and then I would have just enough to do the watering. And that sometimes when it was real dry, I'd have to fill it twice, and it just became a real chore to water. So I really want to work on trying to make that a little easier and still at the same time not get away from the rain catchment. So I just it's important that I just kind of try to work on that. So that's another one of my goals for this year. And hopefully I'll be able to, like I say, if we have a real dry, it all depends on how much rain we have, right? I think with 4 of those totes, I believe they're 275 gallon. So, 4 of them would be 1,100 gallons, right? If I'm doing my math correctly. So if we have the rain we had this past year, I think I can keep those pretty full most of the time. And so if I'm using 50-ish gallons, and so that's the thing with the raised beds and the containers, you go through a lot more water because it drains out. And that's one advantage to the clay soil. It holds the water, it doesn't drain properly. But then not draining is a problem in another respect. So it's kind of just how you manage it. So I think I'm better off with the raised beds and with the containers. I just have to make sure that I keep them watered. Especially, it gets pretty hot here in the summer. And we had, like I said, we had enough rain last year to where I did a lot of it just with the rain. And then in between the rain, I used the 550 gallons of catchment that I had to fill in. So I'm hoping we get a fairly decent rainy year too. But so that was the garden. Let's see. I got some notes here because I'm trying to be organized, and that's not very easy for a knucklehead like me. But so the cold frames and the containers, what I grow in the ground, building the infrastructure. The other thing I really want to talk about is compost, and I hit on it a little. I did buy compost. When I moved down here, it was April 13th last year, and I have one of those 275-gallon IBC totes, and I drilled some holes for aeration. I put it out in the garden, and every bit of kitchen scrap and even the carbon stuff, like junk mail and boxes that I broke down and paper filler that comes in the packages. I put it all in there, and for a year, every single bit of it. And I mean, every day we're putting stuff out there, and stuff that didn't do well in the garden, stuff that I, pulled out when those cucumbers were really bitter. I put them in there because I couldn't eat them. Just a ton of stuff. And right now I got about 6 inches of stuff at the bottom of the bin. So it really, really just breaks down into nothing. But my goal, I'm going to cut that bin in half, and I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to use those for greens. I'm going to grow greens in both of those. So there'd be like self-contained little raised beds. And then I've got a barrel, I think it's a 50 or 57 gallon barrel. I'm going to make a stand for it and make a tumbler, compost tumbler. And I'm going to put, I have the leaves and all the yard waste out in a bin that I made out of pallets, and I flip it over with the loader every now and then. And so that's breaking down nice, and I'm going to make a lot of leaf mold and stuff with that. And that's going to be, that's going to be a separate compost, because I don't want to deal so much with the rodent issue and animals. We have a lot of animals around here, a lot of wildlife, and things will go rooting through there and rip it all apart, and just to get that kitchen scrap. So I want to keep the kitchen scraps contained in a tumbler composting system. And then just when I have the leaf mold, when I go to add it, like next year probably, I'll mix the kitchen scrap one with it right before I add it to the bed. And by then it'll be broken down enough to where I believe that it won't really be an issue with the animals and stuff. At least that's kind of my hope now. I'm not an expert at this, right? I'm kind of learning this as we go. I did a little gardening when I was in Connecticut, but we didn't have compost. We lived in a real small lot. And so a lot of this stuff is just theory, and some of it I researched a little bit, and then, then the last component to it is I'm just going to learn as I go. So my goal is, as I said, I bought a load of compost, and I hope going forward that I'm able to replenish it every year just with what I produce here. So, at the end of the year, I'll do chop and all the leaves, and I've got some people at the church that save their leaves for me, and I'll add those. I mulch them up. I have a mulcher with a leaf vac on the back of it. I'll drive over them, I'll mulch them up, put them in there, and hopefully I'll be able to produce enough compost. And then along with the chop and drop, what I do, like when I in the containers, and I'll do the same thing in the beds, like with the peppers, let's just say I had a lot of those. I cut them at the base, and I threw all the, whatever was growing out of the ground, I threw in the compost bin in the back. But I don't pull the roots out. I let the roots stay in the dirt, and over time they'll rot down, and then that'll cause fissures for air and water, and it should aid, that's my belief, it should aid into the soil health. So that's kind of where I'm going with that. So whatever grows above ground, I'll just chop, and I'll drop it right down on there and let it rot right in. And as I said, in the spring when I redo it, then I'll just add out of my compost to top it off. And I'm gonna also try to keep it mulched, because that'll promote the organisms and the worm activity and all that, which is going to be good for the soil health too. So that's kind of the compost part of it is probably my weakest area. So I'm going to kind of just wing that as I go and adjust as needed. And so if anybody has any suggestions for how to manage that, or ways to increase the productivity of that, I appreciate that. I appreciate any suggestions or any ideas people might have about that. I bought a couple packages of seeds from my gardener for winter ground cover. And I'm going to look into some other things like rye, and there's certain things that'll grow in the wintertime and will add nitrogen back into the soil. And so to promote overall soil health by some of those practices as well. And I'll probably rotate things around. Again, if I do the peppers always in the container, I'll just replenish and refill the dirt. The beds, if wherever, like say I grow squash or whatever, then next year maybe I'll grow the carrots and onions or something else there, and I'll move the squash to another bed. But, was there something, Bruce?
No, I was just putting down my cup of coffee. Sorry.
Oh, okay, that's right. So that, that's kind of my plan for moving stuff around and doing that. The way I look at it, and again, I'm not, again, this isn't, it is a science, but I'm not the scientist. But I think that if I move stuff around, each thing will take different nutrients out of the soil, and that may or may not be right. This is just in my mind what I'm thinking. And so if I grow one thing in this area this year, and then something different next year, maybe the soil will deplete at a more even level. And again, with replenishing too along the way, then that'll help that too. So that's just kind of my thought on that. But that's kind of where I'm going with that. I don't know. Let's see what else I had here. I don't know if I have enough material here for an hour. Like I said, this is like my first real delving into this live stream, other than like being on with Bruce on Monday. But as I said, that was much easier because I just get the link and I come in. It's like it's a no-brainer. It's just kind of how I like things, because for me, that's better. So that's kind of why I was in trouble setting up. I clicked on before I was ready, and then I was like, oh, I could pause it. And when I went to pause it, I shut it off, and then I couldn't restart it. So I had to go in, and it is just a whole to-do. But the other thing I want to touch base on is fruit propagation. So I've got a number of blackberry bushes that I brought with me from Connecticut that I propagated through cuttings, or some of my tip planted, where you take like if they're growing in Connecticut, they were growing out of the ground. I would take a 1-gallon pot, fill it with soil, and I would put it next to it, and I would tie like a string onto it, and I would pull it down. I'd bury the tip in the soil, and I'd stake the string so it held it from springing up. And then 3 weeks or a month, you give it a little tug, and you could see it was rooted in there. And then I would just cut it and then walk away with the pot. And so that's a good way to propagate those berry bushes. And in Connecticut, the way the soil was, the berries were almost like a weed. Like they were very prolific and very easy to propagate. And then with cutting, it's the same thing. I could cut one, and at first I was putting them in water and letting the roots come out, and then putting them in dirt. And then finally I just tried snipping them and sticking them in the dirt. And just doing that, I was probably getting a 70 to 80% success rate. And so they were just there growing, so I had nothing to lose by trying it. And so over the couple of years that I've owned the house, whenever I would come down to work, I would bring a few with me. When it was in the season where I could propagate them up there, I'd bring them down. I'd bring down 6 at a time, sometimes 2 at a time, whatever. I think the most I ever brought down were 8. And some of them died, and some of them didn't make it. I got a dozen or so, whatever, out there now. But those are growing now. The problem with those is, like, if I ever wanted to, let's just say, sell them, like at a farmer's market or something, the cuttings, I don't know the scientific species name. I don't know the strain name. And so I believe there's an ethical issue trying to sell those like that. Now, if I had a friend that wanted some, or, I wanted to expand them here, they're delicious and good to eat, and they haven't gotten to the point where they've borne fruit here. And I don't know why, but they're growing a lot slower here than they did in Connecticut. And I think part of it is because the deer are eating them. And the other part of it, I believe, is the clay soil, because it's just not, they're just not as, the vitality isn't there. But if I wanted to, like I say, expand more, give some to a friend or whatever, then that's fine. But if I want to sell them, like at a farmer's market, I believe that the ethical thing to do there, I really need the name, the strain name. And so I do have a couple that I bought that I have that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take cuttings and tip plant and do those same processes here to try to get a bunch of those. And I also want to do some wood cuttings, because I've got a plum tree, I've got a pear tree, I've got several apple trees, a couple of peach trees, and I want to try to propagate as much of those out as I can. Where my beds are going in back, there were, I think, 18 peach trees, and they were really, they were on their way out. They were, I don't know how old. My neighbor seems to think they were, almost 30 years old. And they were sprayed in the beginning. Then when the guy that lived here got older, and he had, in the end, had a lot of health issues. And so he stopped kind of doing that stuff. And they were rotten on the inside because a couple of them, like I mow around them and I hit them and a big branch would break off. And so they were just, I've asked a couple people that were into peach trees and got some advice from them. And the consensus was that they're probably just at the end of their maturity. And so I decided to just take them out and use that room for the beds. And so I did. I took them out. So what I want to do, I have 2 more that I got a ton of peaches on that are right by the house, and they were delicious. And again, I don't know the name of the strain, or the variety of the peach or anything like that. I just know that they were stinking good. And so I'm going to take some cuttings from those. And again, I can't really sell those. And that's the case with all these trees, because other than those berry bushes that I purchased that I know the strain names of, every other fruit I have here, I don't know the species.
Hey,
so
Tim,
I don't. Yes, sir.
what you may be able to do is, I believe Virginia Tech is an A&M college. You may be able to take like a branch from the plants and take it up to them and ask them if they can give you the strain ID for them. That's something
Oh,
like
really?
an A&M college would probably do.
I think Virginia Tech, it does have an ag section because they have an extension office somewhere not too far from here. So they could like identify it from a sample, kind of like a DNA test on it.
Yeah, they do like a DNA type of testing on it, and they could tell you the phylum and the strain and everything.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's
I'm
the thing that the
look into that.
A&Ms actually do as a service to their communities where they're at. So, check out the extension and ask them if they would do that for you. They may charge like a nominal fee, like
Yeah,
$5 or something, but it probably wouldn't be that bad. And then you'd know what you have.
it'd be worth it. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna look into that. Thanks, I appreciate that. That's a good idea. I wasn't aware that they actually even did that, so that's good to know that. And I definitely will try to do that because I want to try to propagate a bunch out. And going forward, that could be a little income stream for the homestead. And um, maybe not this year. Like maybe this year just to grow out my own. Like I said, I want to where I took all those trees down. I'm doing the beds, but over on the side, I do want to plant some more peach trees, and I would like to also plant a couple more pear trees. And so I can cut those and root them and do them and move them here without knowing the name. But if I ever got to the point where I want to sell them, which I would like to go in that direction, it would be a good way to not, I mean, realistically, not that I'm going to make a ton of money, but if I could make enough to buy some of the supplies I need to keep the growing operation going, then I'd be fine with that. And so,
And you're offsetting it too, because that way, even if you get just a little back to help put back into it, you're not throwing stuff away if it's more than you can eat yourself.
absolutely, absolutely. And there's always expenses, like buying T-posts or hardware wire or whatever, fencing. Right now I've got a lot of infrastructure to build out, fences and stuff like that in the beds, and that's a lot of that's a one-time cost. And I mean, I couldn't make that kind of money, but once I get up and running, I could definitely use that to offset some of the costs. And it looks like I started researching the processes for doing that, and it doesn't look like a real complicated process. So I think I probably could, again, how much success I'm going to have, I don't know, but I'm definitely going to give that a try. And so, even for my friends and people in the community, I mean, I would just like to start there and just, I would just give the excess away. I mean, I've gotten so much benefit from being part of this community in the form of knowledge and, ideas, insights, and just general, like, generosity from people and like gifts that I've received and stuff. And so I would love to give back. And then I look at how is a guy like me going to give back? I don't have a lot of money. And I don't, so if I could grow out, 50 fruit trees, 50 peach trees, or 20 peach trees, and I had people here that were part of the community that wanted to move them over, and that same thing about not knowing the strain may or may not apply, and it depends what people are doing. They may want to know, the strain. But if they're just setting up, on their property where they want to have peach trees, and it doesn't really matter what strain it is or what species it is, then maybe that's not a concern. And so then that could be a way that I could give back to the, like I say, to the community. And I am definitely going to look into that, because I think the Virginia Tech, I want to say it's like in Christiansburg or something. So it's like 45 minutes an hour away, I think, from where I am. And I definitely wouldn't be opposed to doing that. And even if there is a nominal fee, and I would almost expect there to be, then that wouldn't be prohibitive at all to doing that. Because I think that the propagation end of it is, that's, as far as an income stream, is going to be real viable. I looked at, I've been thinking about animals, and I reach dead ends quickly with animals. I guess it just comes down to me, right? And my personality. And I don't know if I'm really an animal person. Like, they don't scare me, so to speak, but I mean, I almost hate to admit it because it sounds stupid, right? But I got a real unnatural fear of snakes. And so when I think of chickens, I like to have chickens. Then I say, okay, well, we can buy farm fresh eggs for $3 to $5 a dozen. So is it worth dealing? Like, and with everything else I got to build out and grow here, do I even have time to think about building a chicken coop or dealing with all that? Like, get the feed and the bedding, and maybe in a couple of years. But then for what we can pay for eggs somewhere else, is it worth having chickens? And then here's the part of it that really turns me off. Chickens attract snakes because they eat the eggs. And like, I'm thinking, like, am I going to go into the chicken coop and have to deal with like snakes curled up in nesting boxes? And you just hear stories about that, and you see it, and a lot of people say, these big black snakes, they don't hurt you, whatever, and they're not afraid of them. But I got an issue with them. And so I don't know if that's really something that, at least at this point, I want to go into animals. Because then I thought about maybe rabbits. And rabbits could be good because the poop is a good cold fertilizer. It doesn't have to be composted. Can go directly into the garden. They seem to be fairly easy maintenance. But then I got the whole like cleaning, butchering, processing part of it. I got to learn that. And then, how comfortable am I doing that? And not that, I value their life more than anything else. Like, I don't really have any problem killing a rabbit or a chicken to put in my freezer, but it's the mechanical process of doing that. And I'm sure I can learn it, but I don't know it now. So it's just another thing that I got to research, learn, figure out, and deal with every day. Once you get them, I believe it's a daily thing. And not that it's a huge amount of maintenance, but they got to be fed. There's sicknesses, right? Then there's the butchering process. So once I get all my garden beds built and I get all the, my gardening infrastructure down pretty good, and I'm producing decent compost, and I've delved into the, fruit propagation end of it and all that, then maybe I will consider animals. I'm almost thinking if I do, I might just go for something like pigs, do a pig or two, and then, try to find somebody, a few people in the community or church or whatever, that want to kind of like offset the cost of owning the pigs by selling the meat. And then, so say we get 3 pigs, and I sell 2 of them and keep 1 for myself. And if the ones that I sell could pay for the entire cost of all 3 of them, then I just break even, don't make any money, but fill my freezer with pork. Maybe something along those lines will work for me down the road. But I think, at least now in the beginning, I'm not sure that's really going to be something, at least this year. I'm not going to really get into animals. We are getting a dog. My stepdaughter, my wife's daughter, has a dog, and she runs her own business, and she's been just going crazy, and she just doesn't have the time. She feels guilty because he's in a crate during the day because she has to share an apartment with somebody else, and it's really not a good environment for the dog. and she's like broken up about not being able to keep them. Hey, Virginia Prepper, how's it going? Good to see you here. But anyway, we have offered to take the dog. And she says, well, next year, you know, I'm going to hire more people for the business. I'm going to buy my own house. I'll have more room for them. Maybe I can. So it's kind of an open-ended thing. She can take them back if she ever wants to. The dog, and I don't even know, she's like, I always say she looks like a Great Dane because she's white with black spots. But she's huge. She's almost like, I mean, a Dalmatian rather. But I think she's more of a Great Dane. I should ask my wife. I shouldn't even brought it up because I don't know. I don't know what she is. She's a big monster, but she's
you know, Chili expat family. You know,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what.
Chile expat family. I think that's somebody.
Oh yeah. I don't know. I didn't. Chile expat family doesn't ring a bell.
Okay, they were saying they were missing you and wishing you were in Chile.
Oh, I've never been in Chile. I've actually never left the country at all. I've never been out of the United States. And, you know, there's probably some good places to live, but I got to be honest with you, I really have no desire to leave the country. I follow David the Good. He's a gardening channel, and he's pretty knowledgeable. He lives down in Central America somewhere, and it looks pretty nice down there, but too hot for me. But anyway, but it's good to have you, Chile expat family. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for coming along. But so I think as far as the dog goes, I'm kind of looking forward to having her here. Be honest with you, because a lot of times, you know, I'm here during the day by myself. It'd be nice to have a companion. And Elise has visited. My stepdaughter has visited with her. And, you know, she doesn't run away. I mean, she's got plenty of room to run in the yard, and she'll go out there and just be happy as a clam running around, and she'll lay down on the grass. And I don't see her being like a nuisance in any way. Now, I will say that I had a German Shepherd, and he was about 120 pounds. He was a pretty big boy. His name was Butchie. He was the best dog in the whole world. Like, I miss that dog every single day. He was well behaved. He didn't bark, but yet he had a protective nature. Like, he was very, like, loyal, I guess is the word. And in every possible way, he was the best dog. And I miss him every day. And so that's why I haven't been in a hurry to get a dog, because I always think, like, I'm just going to be comparing whatever dog I get to Butchie. And, like, no dog is ever going to measure up. And so it's kind of an emotional thing, but that's kind of what's always prevented me from getting another dog. Now, this thing with my stepdaughter's dog, it kind of just crept up. Like, she has this need where she needs to, you know, not that she needs to, but she feels responsible to get a better situation for the dog. And so if we can help her, then we're going to do that. And so, yeah, it won't be Butchie, but no dog ever will be.
Yeah, but you'll fall in love with her too, and the next thing you'll know, she'll want her back.
Well, that's very possible. That's exactly probably what's going to happen. But and she says, and I think she just feels responsible, and, you know, to say that, you know, maybe if things change in a year, I could take her back. I don't really see that happening, but it could. It is always a possibility, I suppose. Prep Rex is saying dogs are wonderful creatures. They certainly are. You know, then I've seen dogs that I would just assume not have, because that was a kind way, because I was going to say something else, but I won't. But the guy down the road from me has two, they're mixed, something with pit bull in them. And the very first time I ever stepped foot on this property, it was 9:30 at night, and I had come down. The closing was the following week, and the owner was already living in assisted living, and I had gotten permission to camp out on the property in anticipation for, you know, the closing. And these two dogs were laying in the front yard when I pulled in, and they were jumping all over the car and barking. And, you know, they're pretty ferocious. They're like 80, 90 pounds. And I was scared. Like, I ended up driving away and going to get a hotel that first night just because I couldn't get out of the car. I tried to figure out who the dogs belonged to. I mean, nobody came. They're here barking and going crazy. Like, don't you realize your dogs are here? Over there? Well, there's only two houses. The lights were completely off in both ones. I didn't know which one the dogs belonged to, and I didn't want to go knocking on people's houses at 9:30 at night in the dark. If I'd known where they belonged, I would have went and knocked on the door, but I didn't want a chance getting the wrong house. And so I just decided to leave, and I came back the next day and I dealt with it. And the guy was apologetic about it, but they were always a nuisance from that day forward. And they would just come, and like, after a while, I realized they were really no threat to me. Like, they weren't going to rip me apart. You know, when I saw them, they were just young and rambunctious, and they were jumping all over me and, you know, whatever. But they kind of got used to me, and I got used to them. And then time went on, and I would come down here when I was working on the house, and I'd be by myself. And it's pitch dark, and we're in the middle of nowhere down here. And I'd be sitting outside, you know, just eating a hamburger or whatever, and they'd be laying there right by the chair, and then both of them would look over in the bushes. They'd hear something, they'd take off, and you hear them over there growling and scraping, and 20 minutes later they come back and lay back down. So I had a sense of security from it. I felt like, okay, like these aren't my dogs. They don't have any loyalty or obligation to me, but yet they're kind of a security measure for me here. Like, I couldn't command them to do anything or count on them to listen to me, but I feel like, you know, if something wandered out of the woods, they'd probably go after it, because I believe they did on several occasions. And so we kind of reached like a mutual understanding. As time went on, you know, it became more of a nuisance. And when Linda came down, she was a little more afraid of them. And we had visitors, a guy that was helping me do the beans, and his wife had dogs, and that was a whole problem. And one of the neighbors ended up calling the pound on them because they didn't just come to my house; they came to everybody's house. And lately, they got a better handle on them. They'll come up once in a while, but he doesn't let them stay, and he'll realize they're out of the yard, and he'll yell, and they'll come back or whatever. So they really haven't been a problem. My across the street neighbor, they're wonderful people. Her and her husband Johnny is always helping me with stuff, and we help each other with all kinds of things. And she says to me, "Ah, I saw those dogs. I was gonna get my gun and shoot them dead." And I'm like, "Whoa!"
Remember, you live in this house now, Tim.
I know, it's a whole different approach. You know, here's this like 70-something-year-old lady. Just the way she said it, like the hair stood up on the back of my neck, and I'm like, and I ain't wandering over there in the middle of the night, I can tell you that.
Yeah, that might be a problem.
Yeah, you have a real bad day real quick. So let's see. Yeah, I used to think that, but each one is special in their own way. Yeah, they are. They are. I guess I just got too spoiled, because when I had Butchie, you know, he was perfect in every single way. I mean, it sounds crazy, but that dog did not have one flaw. He didn't have one flaw. He was the best dog. You know, if anything, I would say like he wasn't mean enough. Like, not mean, but well, I had my cabin in Vermont, and I was there by myself several times, and I'd be out there sitting at the fire. One night I'm sitting at the fire, and it was dusk, and the double doors were open to the cabin, and Butchie, he would lay right on the wooden floor, right inside the cabin, but yet he was right in the double doors. So he was like outside, but I think he liked the evenness. He was old, and so when he would lay down, like in the house, he'd go over to the wall, and he'd kind of tip over until he leaned against the wall, and he'd slide down, because he had a real bad hip problem. I think that's why he liked it. He didn't lay down outside too much at that point. I think he liked the inside because it was nice and even, whatever. But he's laying down right inside the cabin, and a chipmunk ran right in front of him, right under his nose. Like, and he got up, and he backed up and went and laid down underneath the table 15 feet into the cabin. He actually went and hid from a chipmunk, 125-pound German Shepherd. And I'm like, are you kidding me, Butchie? You are a disgrace to dogdom. You know, but he literally wouldn't hurt a fly. Like, he would not harm a fly. And he would, I remember being sick one time, and I lived on a second floor apartment, and he had to go out, and the door, the guy upstairs, and like I said, he never barked, but he didn't like that guy upstairs. Whenever he walked in or out, he would have to come down the stairwell and walk right by our door. Butchie would just do this low, guttural, like, growl. Not even a growl, just like a. And he would go over and he'd sit by that door, and his hair would be standing up in the back of the neck, and he would take that posture until he heard the door shut and the guy leave. And when he came back, same thing. And then as soon as he got in his apartment upstairs, he would stop. But the whole time that guy was in the stairwell, Butchie was there, and he did not like that guy. And everybody else, he never had a problem with anybody else. That was the only person I've ever seen him do that with. When they would come in and out, the door downstairs, when it was nice out and the inner big door inside was open, they would just push the screen door open like we all did, and it would shut, but it wouldn't latch. And so that time when I was sick, I would open the door, and Butchie would run down, nudge the door open, go out and back and do his business. And I'd watch him through the window, because usually he wouldn't run away, but he'd look around, he'd realize I wasn't there, and he'd start wandering toward the border a little bit, because the yards were small. And he just wanted, he wasn't doing anything wrong. He just wanted to explore a little. And I'd open the window. I was like, hey, what are you doing? And he'd turn around and he'd come right back up, and he'd go over to the door. He'd stick his nose in. He'd push the door open, and he'd go through and come back up. And he'd do that on his own. And usually I would go down with him. But like I was sick, that time I was sick, I didn't do that. But he was just a funny Butchie story. Everybody that saw him was scared to death of him. But he literally would not hurt a fly. So there were. What's that?
Look at what X typed in.
I think that's what Tim was. I'm not proud of it, but I do. It could be true. But I brought him down to this park, and there was a trail at the back of the park that led quite a ways down along the river, and you're supposed to have the dog leashed. But Butchie didn't need to be leashed. But the normal world didn't understand that. But whenever I brought him there, if there were people, like there was almost always people there, I would stick the leash on him, and I would walk him around the edge of the park. And then when we got to the trail, I would unleash him. And he would always come when I called him, and he would always stay with me. He never, he was literally the best behaved dog you could ever imagine in your life. And so we'd walk a couple miles down, a couple miles back. And then when we got near the park, I'd releash him and walk him across to the car. One time I got there, and I didn't see anybody there. There were no cars. There wasn't a soul, which was very rare. Well, there was 2 ball fields, and the parking lot was up on one side. And when I looked down across the first ball field, there was this big dugout and bleacher complex. And that was the same thing, was a mirror image on the other field. And there was like 20 feet in between them. Well, there was a group of probably at least a dozen. I think they were like Ecuadorians. They were playing soccer on that piece of grass. And they obviously walked there. They didn't drive because there was no cars. But when I looked down, I couldn't see them. They were completely obscured by the bleachers and the dugout. And so whenever there wasn't anybody there, which wasn't too often, I would just open the door and let Butchie run out. Well, he did, and he saw them, and he beelined toward them. Now, they had a soccer ball. So he saw the ball. Hey, we're going to play ball, right? Well, they see this 120-pound German Shepherd running toward them. They're like, oh, no, he's going to kill us, because that's just what he looked like. And there is a little language barrier because, of course, me being from this country, I speak fluent English. Not everybody does. And so I'm yelling, he's okay, he's okay, he's not going to hurt you. Well, they're panicking, and it was like when Godzilla came to New York. You know, I mean, like if there was a tower, they would have climbed it. And they're running and scattering. Well, all Butchie wanted was that ball. And he went directly for that ball. and I'm trying to chase him. Of course, I can't outrun him. He got that ball in his mouth, and he shook it, and it was just small enough to fit in his mouth. Well, don't you know, he punctured it. So
Oops.
the ball's punctured now, right? So these guys are like, they're screaming in horror. I came over. I'm like, no, he's okay, you know. And I felt bad about the ball. I says, I'll buy you another ball. It's my fault. I didn't have him on the leash, whatever. They didn't understand a word I was saying. Well, one guy, you know, I held the ball up. I'm like, I'll go get you another ball. He's like, no. Don't worry about it, whatever. He spoke broken English. And I told him, I said, don't worry about the dog, because they were just afraid that the dog was charging at him. They thought like this is it, our lives are over. It was funny because, you know, it was my fault because he was supposed to be on a leash, and that's exactly why, because he's intimidating. But if you know him, you know him, and I didn't know that they were there, so it was just the circumstance. I looked out and I saw complete nobody there at all. Both ball fields were completely empty. There wasn't a car in the parking lot, and I'm like, well, he doesn't need to be on a leash going across, but he did because he got the ball, and I did. I felt bad, but it's just one of those things. It's kind of funny. It's kind of funny now as I look back on it, but then I felt really bad about it. But I think that's about it. Let me just consult my list here really quick. I think I got everything, and we just about filled an hour. So, yep, that's about it. So I guess I'm going to wrap it up. I want to just thank everybody for coming. Prepper X, thanks for the super chat. I really appreciate that, brother. That was very generous, and it'll go to good use. Thank you all for bearing with me in the beginning during the glitch, the little bit of technical glitch that I had. And backwards off, thank you for coming in and helping me be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. And appreciate you keeping an eye on the chat for me. It makes it kind of easy when I don't have to multitask. It seems very simple, and it is for many people, but for me, sometimes it's just a little too much. But I do appreciate it as always. And again, thanks everybody for coming. And hope everybody has a great night. I appreciate you all. I appreciate everybody in this community, everything this community has done for me and given to me. And if there's anything I could ever do to help anybody out, I'd love to be able to do that. And so if anybody's in the area, lives in the Southern Virginia area and wants any of those fruit bushes or trees when I propagate them, of course, I could completely fail on it and do 50 of them, not have one tree to give away. But whatever I do have, I'm going to be willing to share with the community. And if I have to drive the Roanoke to deliver them or whatever, that's the biggest city, to meet somebody, I'm not afraid to do that either. So thank you all for coming. Have a good night. God bless you.
You know how to shut it down, Timo?
I do. And then when I do, I'm not gonna be able to communicate with you either, right?
Now, when you hit the stop button, we'll still be connected, but it'll stop transmitting.
Oh, okay.